Hey, everyone out there in internet land, something like that, social media land, whatever we want to call it.
South Dakota high school football land.
Yes, it is Football Insiders once again. David Brown, Jason Andera. It is the halfway point of the regular season, just past the halfway point for most teams, including in 11 AAA, Game 5 of the 9-game regular season. So what did we learn this week? Well, Lincoln's pretty good. Yes, that's a brand new thing that we learned just this week, is that the Lincoln Patriots are good. No, 58-35. The 1-2 matchup, Lincoln versus O'Gorman. You had the call on Midco Sports. It was competitive for the first half, and I think O'Gorman showed the versatility of its weapons. But early in that second half, Pat scored 2 touchdowns within the first minute and a half and just kept that distance from there en route to a season-high 58 points.
It was a 2-point game at halftime. O'Gorman kept up with Lincoln for the most part, but in the second half, Lincoln went 4 for 4 on their possessions in the third quarter, all for touchdowns. And it started with Draven Hodge, who had an electric second half, lit it up for Lincoln, and then Jack Smith catching 4 touchdown passes. He was unstoppable at times. On the other side, there's some positives for O'Gorman in this one. Maverick Jones played a heck of a game. 100 yards rushing. He ran really hard. And he also had 100 yards receiving in the game. Hayden Gross went over 300 yards without an interception passing. Defensively, obviously, that's where you're going to have to make some changes if you want to compete with Lincoln. The good thing is their coaching staff will make those changes. They always find a way to make it closer in the playoffs. But right now, if that's the toughest test for Lincoln, don't get too cocky, Lincoln, but you guys are looking you're looking at an undefeated season.
They're looking really good right now. You mentioned Draven Hodge, just committed to the University of South Dakota earlier this week. Jack Smith, the future Jack Rabbit, now the career leader in touchdown receptions for Sioux Falls Lincoln after his 4 TD performance. And then Tate Schaefer is going to the University of Sioux Falls next season. He set some records as a quarterback.
Also the career leader in touchdown passes and only 171 yards away from setting the school record for passing yards. So that's some big-time company when Alex Schultz put himself right at or near the top of a lot of the record books, about a decade ago, and now Tate Schaefer is just picking those apart. By the time he's done, he's going to be in very rare company with some of those career marks.
Yeah, you mentioned the Lincoln don't get cocky part, but it's hard to look at this team right now. I know we kind of make this comparison off and on and not think this is this year's Jefferson. This is the team that, like Jefferson last season, just was dominating every single game. Lincoln has not really been tested, quote unquote, in terms of the closeness of a game. I mean, other teams have played them well. O'Gorman played them well for a half, but you look at these final scores, and Lincoln just seems to have it this season. Again, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but they have that it factor, and it's not going to be a matter of if a team beats them. I hate to say it. There are great teams in AAA, but I don't think it's going to be a matter of if a team beats them. It's if Lincoln stumbles.
It's exactly what Curtis Riggs said on the broadcast, is the only team that can beat Lincoln is Lincoln. And yes, they can make mistakes. They haven't yet. Yeah. I mean, Schaefer has had a phenomenal year taking care of the football. The turnover margin has not been there. Somebody's going to have to go in there and ruin the takeaway, the plus-minus, to get into a game and to be able to compete with the Pats. That still can happen because there's still a lot of teams that are still getting better in AAA. That being said, you're right. I mean, it's hard to imagine a team, rising up to the level that the Patriots have been at this year.
Again, we're not crowning them quite yet, but still, we want to just, point out the fact that Lincoln has really done an excellent job through these first 5 games. O'Gorman, obviously, as we mentioned, they played well, just not quite good enough to hang with the Pats for more than a half.
And I think, they played a couple close games this year. They showed that they can play with them for a half. It's just going to be really hard for them when they have 5 of their guys, 6 of their guys going both ways, but basically they're 5 talent, skill position guys, all playing both ways. That's really tough when you get to second halves and then the second half of the season. That being said, like I said, the coaching staff at O'Gorman does a phenomenal job, and they always get better the second time they play somebody.
Jefferson, 63-0 over Mitchell. That was their double-A opponent. Didn't really learn a whole lot there from the Cavaliers. They just took care of business. Harrisburg, a nice win against Roosevelt. Brandon Valley has now won 3 in a row after an 0-2 start. 3 straight shutouts for the Lynx.
Yeah, they're starting with their lead foot on defense with those 3 shutouts in a row. And Matt Christensen, who we'll have on in the show here in a little bit, he's told me earlier he doesn't remember ever having 3 straight shutouts in a season. So he thinks this Brandon Valley defense is doing some special things, and we'll see if they can maybe be that team that steps up and challenges Lincoln.
Yeah, the top 5 this week in AAA remains unchanged. Even with Lincoln defeating O'Gorman, they're still 1-2. Jefferson 3, Harrisburg 4, Brandon 5. Probably the game of the week simply within the AAA rankings is going to be Jefferson number 3 at number 2 O'Gorman.
And you just watched Jefferson. They had a little respite the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
Central, Mitchell.
After the blowout loss to Lincoln.
Right, now it's time to get back to business against an O'Gorman team. And we'll see if they can take advantage of O'Gorman the same way that Lincoln did by just grinding it out in the second half. I think Jefferson's defense is one of the few defenses that can keep up with some of those skilled players, but they're going to have their hands full.
Yeah, and you mentioned the respite playing Central and Mitchell, but, we talked with Vince Benedetto last week ahead of the game against Mitchell, and, he was frank. He wants his guys to get reps, and unfortunately for him, the defense played so well. There was one point where the defense scored 3 straight touchdowns. The offense was on the field for 4 minutes of that first half, and they led 56-0 because the defense was playing so well. And then started the second half, he takes out his starters because he doesn't want things to get out of hand. And so, to be frank, even though they've gotten a bit of a respite, his starters have probably played the equivalent of 1 game the past 2 games. So they're going to get a challenge this week at OD.
I can't wait. I'll be at that game, and I think we're going to have a great game in the second half, just like O'Gorman's played really close this year with a couple of other teams.
Other games in AAA this week, Rapid City Stevens is going to be at number 1 Lincoln. Washington is going to be at Harrisburg. Central's going to be at Roosevelt, and we keep harping on it every week, but Roosevelt just has not had a complete team this year, and now Gravengood is hurt.
Yeah, he's been out the last 2 weeks. The 1 week that they had everybody back was the 1 week they got their win, but that wasn't even, a really tidied up performance. This could be one of those teams that does something surprising late in the year that we're like, where'd that come from? And we know they have the talent, so people have to beware that this Roosevelt team is talented. They just haven't put it all together yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside the top 5 right now, but as you said, if they ever get a complete team together, we're not saying that they're going to, all of a sudden rise in the rankings,
right.
But they're a team that you get them at the right time or the wrong time if you're an opponent, and things can go wrong. So Roosevelt's a team I think you just watch out for, but as we mentioned, every 11 AAA team has to play a AA team during the season, and this matchup right here is what we got going on this week. It's Brandon Valley at Pierre. If you remember last season, Pierre went into Brandon. Lincoln Keenholz led a comeback, and they won on Brandon's field, and now the Lynx return the favor at Pierre. Brandon number 5 in AAA, Pierre number 1 in AA.
Brandon was down in that game early. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and they still had a lead at halftime in that game. So they felt like they're going to be able to pull away in the second half. Well, Lincoln Keenholz had other ideas, and he came back and was virtually unstoppable. He would either find Jet Zabel for a touchdown or he would scramble for a touchdown. This year, Pierre does not have that, but this game remains very intriguing and very close. And we caught up with both coaches, Steve Steele and Matt Christensen. They also think this is going to be a highly competitive game.
I think most people are expecting a competitive game. I'm guessing you are too. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, this should be a great football game. It should be a big challenge for both teams, hopefully. And I just think that it's going to be kind of conflicting styles. I mean, they're a very big team. They're big and strong and powerful. And I think we're a pretty fast team, especially defensive team speed's really good. And I think we're physical, but we're definitely not as big as they are. So we'll have to troubleshoot that, and they'll have to troubleshoot some things, and should ultimately be a really good game at the end of the day.
Tell me about some of what you think are the keys to the game. Obviously, it's blocking and tackling, but what has to go right for you guys to beat a team like Brandon Valley?
Yeah, I think a large portion of this game is going to come down to third downs. I think they might have a little bit more of a quick strike capability with their 2 receivers. But I think at the same point, I think both teams are going to get into a lot of third downs, and I think the winner is going to be the one that converts on the most of them on the offensive side, or wins the most of them on the defensive side.
How you doing?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Yeah, good. It's that time of the year. Things are getting more clear, and it's clear you guys have been playing some defense the last few weeks.
We've been moving a lot more, blitzing, stunting, and we're good at that. And it's been going well, and we're trying to ascend and been playing better ball control. So we held on to the ball against these teams. We've had 3 shutouts in a row, and I don't think we've had 3 in my life at Brandon Valley here since 2003.
When you think about this game, what do you think the keys to the game are for you guys to get the outcome that you're looking for?
Ball control, takeaways, limiting big plays on defense, making those big plays on offense. When we stop ourselves with drop passes or penalties, it hurts, and good teams can exploit that and take advantage of those opportunities against you. You're going to have to just block really well. They got smart defensive players who can read their keys and get to the ball, but if they're getting blocked, it doesn't really matter what they're seeing and how fast they're reacting to it. Got to be physical. We got our receivers really block hard and get into their DBs and get to the next level and turn 10-yard runs into bigger ones and just handle another long road trip. Just got back from Rapid City, Stevens, and head out to Pierre now, and it'll be all kinds of fun challenges and little aspects and ride the momentum. You get it and keep it, and then when we don't have it, get it back and keep a high school heart full of ambition and competition, not fear and concern. Just play with confidence. We have it in the kids. We know they'll give their best efforts Friday.
So once again, Brandon Valley and Pierre in the capital city on Friday. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. I think we both agree Brandon Valley will not get its fourth straight shutout. I'm sorry to say I don't think Pierre is going to get shut out at home. I don't think Pierre's just going to get shut out anywhere. But as you mentioned, Lincoln Kienholz was kind of the catalyst for that Governor win last season. Again, nothing against Kaiser, nothing against the rest of these Pierre Governors, but this is a Brandon team that has a little bit of revenge on its mind and is riding a little bit of momentum.
Brandon Valley has all the pieces, that's for sure. Levi Veskrin has done a good job running behind that huge offensive line. The weapons are unbelievable with Bonwell Whitty and Landon Delaney when they play at a high level. And Jack Dewey's done a really good job. And then we've seen what the defense has done. I think Brandon's really ready to take that next step up. Pierre has a big offensive line as well and a big defensive line as well. They played really well last week against a big offensive line in Watertown and handled their business. So I think Pierre's not going to be intimidated like most teams are by this Brandon Valley offensive line. So I think that evens things out a little bit. The talent is deep on both sides. It's going to be, it's going to come down to blocking and tackling and turnovers. Obviously that's football for you, but that's, the coaches believe that too. It's just going to come down to execution and who makes the least mistakes.
And let's continue the Pierre talk as we move solely into 11AA right now. You mentioned the win against Watertown, 49-20. The top four teams in 11AA played each other this past weekend. So Watertown goes to Pierre. Pierre builds a big lead early. Maybe not as tough a challenge as Yankton was 2 weeks ago. But Watertown still showed a little something. I think Watertown is a solid number 4 team. I think they still have a little bit more to prove, but I think they can compete. And I'm not saying this might be a semifinal rematch to watch, but I am saying that the Arrows, they have some positives to take away, even though they lost by 29 points.
Totally agree with that. The line shown through, they're still really strong when they run the ball. They're still really strong on the defensive line. Trey Hemrick is good against certain defenses. He felt the pressure against Pierre and wasn't able to handle all that pressure. That might be something where he's different in a couple weeks, where he gets used to playing at that higher level. But right now, that's what's keeping him down. And other than that, they showed that they can play with these 11AA teams.
Absolutely. And then the 2-3 matchup, we were really looking forward to this because T had kind of been the consensus number 2 for about a year and a half, honestly, to Pierre. And then we saw Yankton kind of during the early part of the season show some moxie. They were in this game against Pierre a couple weeks ago. They were leading at halftime. They were tied in the fourth quarter before eventually losing. So we were wondering, how do the Bucks bounce back? They have to go on the road against the next best team, in theory, in AA. And they win this one 37-26. And honestly, it was not that close. T scored late in the second half. And I think just the overall consensus to me is Yankton is the far and away number 2 team right now.
I totally agree. And Shaler Platt did not play in this game for Yankton, and they were still able to do what they do on defense. Evan Sirk was able to run the ball. They got up. They had some big special teams plays. But actually, both teams had kick return touchdowns in that game. But they really felt like they controlled that game from beginning to end. Lucas Kamshoff has had a tremendous season. The numbers weren't, extraordinary, but he controlled that game with his arm and his feet.
Absolutely. Just quick shout out to Keegan DeYoung of T, committed to MSU Moorhead earlier this week. One of the best NSIC schools, so just wanted to mention him as well. So now for me, the question is, okay, so the Bucks hang with Pierre. They lose a tough one. They come back, they win on the road against T. So we're at the halfway point of the season. Right now is, can the Bucks gear up down the stretch for what they think? Because in their minds, they're like, we want another shot at Pierre, and we want it in the Dakota Dome this time.
Well, I think they have done a great job of securing that potential number 2 seed, which is what they'll need to play a home game and not have to see Pierre on the way to a championship, either a 1 or 2 seed, depending on how Pierre finishes up.
Yeah, very true.
Things could happen there. But, yeah, I think they definitely have that in the back of their mind, but they are doing a good enough job of just keeping one game in front of them at a time, and Brady Muth does a great job culturally keeping everybody focused on that next game.
So Pierre and Yankton 2, T stays at 3, Watertown at 4, Spearfish at 5. The top 5 remained unchanged in 11 AA this week. Kind of quietly, Aberdeen Central has won 3 in a row. Remember, they started the season at number 5. What do you think of the Golden Eagles?
They did this last year, too, where they started out not up to par and then finished up strong and then won a playoff game.
Yep.
And I think this year we could see the same thing. Avery Ligon has done a great job running the football for them. They were wondering who's going to maybe step up and be that guy in the backfield. Well, Avery has done a great job of doing that. And I think they're going to be a threat. They're kind of in that same ballpark as Watertown, and they actually play Watertown this week, and we'll find out where they rank in there. And then another team in the top 5, Spearfish, their only loss this year has come to Yankton.
Yeah.
They're a team that you got to start paying attention to a little bit.
Yeah, Spearfish is 4-1, ranked number 5, as you mentioned. Their loss to Yankton came a couple weeks ago, 42-27. I guess the question is if they're enough of a threat to make some noise.
Hard to tell.
And I look at their next 3 weeks. They're at Mitchell this week, and Mitchell obviously just got blasted by Sioux Falls Jefferson. But then the next 2 weeks for Spearfish, Watertown and T, two top 5 teams, but both of them at home. So I think the next 3 weeks will really tell us if Spearfish is for real.
Yeah, and they've done a good job. Seth Hamilton at quarterback had a phenomenal week last week, and they've got playmakers on the outside in Braden De La Hoyd and some of these guys. They're a lot stronger than they were a couple years ago.
So we mentioned the big matchups, Brandon Valley and Pierre. Yankton is going to host Brookings. T is at Sturgis. Watertown, as you mentioned, is at Aberdeen Central. And then Spearfish at Mitchell. That's kind of the top 5 for AA. Moving on to Single A and Del Rapids. No issues whatsoever with Millbank. And the offense, I think, over the past 2 weeks, because they put up 48 against Canton 2 weeks ago, the offense for the Couriers has really exploded these past 2 weeks, and this is after they struggled to score 20 against Hot Springs.
Yeah, it was a huge wake-up call. Definitely a fire under their butts. And this is really fun to watch them do what they do because Jack Henry still does not have to throw the ball for them to win games. Mason Stubbe carried the ball 4 times. He got tackled 1 time during the game and scored 3 other touchdowns. This is a team that would just absolutely can run the ball up and down the field, and then defensively, they're doing their job too.
Yeah, if Del Rapids can, not even if they can sustain this 50-point per game pace, if they can sustain 30, 40 points per game, they're going to be very tough to stop.
Yes. I think everybody's starting to realize they might have an extra gear that the rest of the teams in 11A do not have.
The big game this past weekend, West Central and Canton, it was a 2-3 matchup. West Central sneaks by 32-28. This was a lot closer game throughout. The Canton backfield, the Hurricane backfield, as we dubbed them, with McCracken and Wallner did its thing. But West Central, they find a way to win these close games.
Yeah, that's dangerous when you have a team that finds a way to win. I don't think they played their sharpest game, that's for sure. And they still found a way to win. They turned the ball over 3 times to Canton's just 1 time. West Central didn't look flashy, didn't look like that much better of a team, but they executed when they needed to. And that's a sign of a team that even when they're not at their best and they're still undefeated like they are and beating a good team, good things ahead for them.
And Del Rapids and West Central, by the way, do not play each other in the regular season. They've been 1-2 all year. They're both undefeated. They could be on a collision course for the Dakota Dome, but there's going to be some teams below them, especially in that 4-5 receiving votes area. And so we wanted to look at kind of the bottom of this bracket of this top 5. Sioux Falls Christian's number 4, Lennox is number 5. Dakota Valley's receiving votes, they've kind of been 5 in and out over the past couple weeks. And I guess you and I were wondering, who's the best of those 3?
It's a tough call because right now you look at Lennox, just the one loss and the gear that they have, that 5th gear they have on offense that nobody else seems to have. And they put it into 5th gear in the 4th quarter against Beersford to make that look a little bit more of a blowout than it actually was. I don't think anybody has that gear that they do. The question is for them, defensively, can they make sure they don't have to get into a shootout with other teams? Sioux Falls Christian, they've definitely had the toughest schedule of anybody.
Yeah, they got it really rough, but it eases late. And Lennox, it's the exact opposite. Their schedule is going to get tougher down the stretch.
Right, exactly. And that's, I think, where we're going to see the separation between those two teams. Dakota Valley has a couple of big games coming up. Defensively, Dakota Valley has shown me they can play. And when you bring defense, that carries into, October and November. So I really like what they bring to the table. We just need a signature win out of Dakota Valley to maybe consider them as a team that could maybe make an upset.
Because in theory, one of these 3 teams might play Del Rapids in the semifinals in the playoffs. And so I look at these 3, I don't know, just to me, Sioux Falls Christian just took that punch early on, and now they've kind of course-corrected things. The schedule, as I mentioned, kind of eases late. I just really like the Chargers, especially getting healthy again down the stretch. Of those 3, that's why I like them.
The impact that Cole Snyder has made since he returned can't be understated. He's scoring like 3 touchdowns a week. Offensively, he's ignited their passing game, which, they struggled with. But when Lincoln Prince has Cole Snyder, they can pass and run. And then defensively, he's making he made 3 picks last week. He made a couple picks the week before. They to me really feel like they could be, them and Canton could be that 3 seed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, again, the Lennox, Dakota Valley, we've both mentioned, I think Lennox's offense is probably the best among those 3. Dakota Valley's defense, it was a tie game, a close game. They were winning against Sioux Falls Christian in Game 3 of the season. That was that gut check time for the Chargers where they were staring at an 0-3 hole, came back, won on the road. And Dakota Valley, it's not like they haven't recovered since then. They're still a good team, but they're kind of just lurking beneath the surface right now.
They're waiting for that. They need that signature win. Yeah. And, they got a couple games coming up. They have Lennox this week that could be one of those, I don't know about signature win, but it would definitely be a quality one.
Yeah, the winner of that game probably more than likely is the number 5 team in the polls next week since Lennox is the current number 5. Del Rapids hosts Beersford. Canton is at Madison. Madison is one of those teams where name recognition probably gets them a little further than maybe they are right now, but it's always tough to play in Madison. We've seen that from other teams this season. Sioux Falls Christian hosts Millbank. Tri-Valley is at West Central. But I agree, the Dakota Valley-Lennox game is going to say a lot about that kind of the middle of the pack.
Yeah, I love it. Great offense in Lennox, great defense in Dakota Valley. And who knows, maybe it'll flip-flop and it'll be the Lennox defense and the Dakota Valley offense that show off. I'm not sure. But it should be a close game, and it's important for both of those 2 teams.
Let's move to 11B. Really, the only game of note last week, Sioux Valley had no issues with McCook Central Montrose. It was a nice quality road win for the Cossacks. And they're one of 4 undefeated teams in 11B, along with Winter, who's number 1. They were off last week. Dual, which snuck into the top 5 this week after 3 straight shutouts, they're 6-0. And then Woonsocket, Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central, who won the Co-op Bowl last week. But those are your 4 undefeated teams. I think it's safe to say Winter and Sioux Valley have kind of separated themselves just because of the quality of opponents they've faced.
Yeah, I think they for sure have had the toughest opponent percentage. But let's break these teams down. Yes, Trent Olson from Winter, the head coach there, told me, hey, there's 7 or 8 teams in 11B that could be contenders. Yes, but we're going to focus on these 4 unbeaten teams and see, why they're unbeaten, maybe why they have potential to continue that. Winter is getting stronger. They had the toughest schedule so far. Their opponent win percentage is .571. They've taken care of business. They got another tough opponent coming up this week who has just 1 loss. They got West Central coming up down the road. It's not going to be an easy road for Winter here on out, that's for sure. They are running the ball much better than they were early in the year, but they still have definitely something to prove. Dual, on the other hand, a very physical team. Last year, ended up losing 1 game. This year, have a chance to be undefeated for the first time since 1989. This Dual Cardinal team is one of the best that they've had, and they're doing it plugging in sophomores and freshmen to go with that heavy senior class that they have, but they've had to plug in some pieces they were not expecting to play this year. But Trey Mayland has done an awesome job at quarterback as the dual threat quarterback, and their physicality has really gotten them through. And they're looking at their schedule, they should. I mean, you always should. But they should be undefeated on the year, and that includes, their toughest game has come against Roncalli, though, where they got a shutout earlier this year. But they've been playing really quality ball. Sioux Valley, they haven't had a one-score game yet this year. They had, the two-score win over Elk Point Jefferson was their closest game. Last week against McCook Central Montrose, I think some people wanted to see them, put up 50 on them, and they only put up 34. But we're nitpicking here.
It's a road game.
We're nitpicking, yeah.
You'll take any road win by double.
And talking to Dan Hughes, their head coach this week, he said the difference for them is the adjustments that they've been making in-game, and he gives all the credit in the world to his assistant coaches. He said they've done a phenomenal job of making in-game adjustments, and he thinks that gives them an advantage that they haven't had quite as much over the last few years. And then talking about Woonsocket, Wessington, Spring, Sanborn Central, out of these undefeated teams, they've had the easiest schedule so far this year. They haven't had a win against a team over 500. They still have Rapid City's Christian coming up, a team that they beat last year. They feel like they can match up pretty well with again this year. So they look like they could be undefeated as well. Last year, went 6-2, ended up losing in the first round to Redfield. They think they're improved over that, but an undefeated season would help them seeding-wise, which would be huge for them in the playoffs.
So you mentioned Dual was undefeated, and you said they're going for an undefeated season for the first time since what year?
1989.
There's your one Taylor Swift reference for this entire episode. Mark it down.
Oh, look at this guy.
And now we can do it on the YouTube keyword search. And welcome Swifties to Football Insiders.
Oh, so great.
So the big game this week, Bridgewater Emory Ethan at Winter. Seahawks actually fell out of the top 5, even though they were idle last week. I understand Dual's done great. I just, for me as a voter, I don't think you fall out of the top 5 if you're
I did.
You're off. That's just me, but
I haven't had them in my top 5 almost all season because, their best, they don't have a signature win yet.
True. But yeah, I mean, obviously they have been doing well.
Though,
they were doing well, but that's the big matchup. They're at Winter this week. And just one last note on Winter. A far cry. Remember that 8-0 Tri-Valley game?
Oh, yeah.
All those weeks ago, we were just like, okay, what
do we got here?
What do we have here? And they're just like, all right, that was just a little hiccup to start. Winter is they're rolling again. 9-man stuff. We had a lot of interesting 9-man stuff this past week. A lot of cross-class matchups. I think probably the big one that I noticed, I'm sure you noticed, Canastota, who was number 1 in 9A, undefeated, had already beaten a couple of AA teams earlier this season. They fall to Hanson, and Hanson right now is not ranked in the top 5. I put them at 5 just because I think the quality of their wins is just insane right now. Hanson's not in the top 5 just because they're 3-2. Everyone else in 9AA is 5-1 or better, but I don't think this is necessarily a bad loss for Canastota. I do think it's a great win for Hanson, and I think Hanson, kind of like Dakota Valley in the 11-man ranks, Hanson is kind of lurking beneath the surface, and I think teams got to be very careful.
Very careful because, their only 2 losses came to Howard, a fairly close game, very first game of the year, and then Parkston they played really well with, and the only team to play well with Parkston this year. And Brock Tuttle, he was huge last week, took the direct snap for a touchdown, 4 big touchdowns on the day. He's a weapon out there, and he's the kind of guy you can lean on, even if the weather gets bad. So playoff time looks good for this Hanson team. Very props to them. And Canastota, a tough schedule, and only to have that 1 loss. I mean, not a huge mark yet.
No, and we remember Canastota beating Howard to start the season. That was when Howard was ranked number 1 in AA. But nothing to hang your hat on if you're Canastota. Hanson got a late touchdown to make it a 10-point game, but certainly an interesting result. The other interesting cross-class result from last week, Warner, which had been number 1 in 9A for a while, but were number 2 coming in, facing the number 1 9B team in Falkton. Tight game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, in the fourth quarter, it took a Warner score at the end of the game to vault them to victory, but the second half was deadlocked. And in the first half, it took a big play by Layden Cotton of Falkton to get them on the board, but Hunter Kramer and company, they are a physical team. They've got a physical and athletic quarterback in Hunter Kramer. They're really tough to beat, but those are 2 LRC teams that could be making some noise at the Dome.
Absolutely. So you look at the top 5. We'll start at 9AA. Parkston, Hamlin, Howard, Wall, Elkton Lake, Benton. Again, I thought Hanson deserved to be in the top 5 just because of the quality of their wins. The big matchup, Hamlin, number 2 in 9AA, is going to face Warner, the number 1 now, the new number 1 in 9A. So Warner in back-to-back weeks facing really difficult teams in other classes.
Yeah, we kind of looked ahead at this and said, hey, this is time to prove it if you can do it against those two teams. Hamlin is a really good team too, and they feel like they're not at their best right now. Jeff Sheehan, their head coach, said we've had to plug in a lot of players that we weren't expecting to plug in. Going into the year, their best player, Luke Frazier, hasn't played yet, and they continue to see if he can come back and play. And they're still doing what they're doing, putting teams, down through the pass, through the run. Tyson Stevenson's done a great job throwing the football this year. Turner Stevenson, his best target in the passing game, has done a great job catching them. They've got 4 different backs who are getting it done. So Hamlin is locked, and Warner brings a really physical team with a lot of experience to the field. That's going to be a good test.
Yeah, Mason Trowbridge has done excellent. The Stevensons, Wadsworth. I mean, yeah. you can go down the list of Chargers that have done well. The 9A top 5, we mentioned Warner's number 1. Harding County Bison moves up to number 2. Canastota falls to 3. Phillip is 4. Alcester Hudson is 5. And Harding County Bison, they have a cross-class matchup with Wall, the number 4 team in 9AA.
And Harding County, they started the year out with basically Riley Veal left, Riley Veal right, running the football, and now they've gone to a place where they can throw the ball a little bit more effectively. Their quarterback has done a great job in these last 3 weeks, and their head coach, Jay Wamman, said it's because we're giving him time to throw the ball. Being a dual-threat team helps them so much. They're going to give Wall a really tough game, and Burke Blasius, he's been one of the best quarterbacks regardless of class for Wall, and he gives them a chance to win every time he steps on the field.
Yep, that game in the northwestern part of South Dakota coming up later this week. Kind of fallen off the map a little bit. Gregory, though, they were number 1 to start the season in 9A, obviously as the defending champs. Suffered from early losses. They're completely out of the top 5. They got a tough test at Parkston, but the Gorillas, again, quietly have won 3 in a row.
Right. They've quietly won 3 in a row. Nothing too crazy, but they still have a lot of talent on that team. And every time Gregory and Parkston play, I mean, you say this, but it's almost never actually true. It's actually true. You can throw out the records when these two teams get together. Two conference foes that whenever they play, it's going to be a surprise. I've seen so many times these two teams have played over the last 5 years where you're shocked by who wins. It doesn't matter which team is ranked higher.
And then 9B, Falkland stays at number 1, obviously, in spite of the loss to Warner. And then big matchup this week, Avon, 5-1. Again, another cross-class matchup against undefeated Alcester Hudson.
I thought it was interesting as I looked at and compared their schedules. They had the exact same score against Gayville-Vollen.
52-22.
Both of them won 52-22. I mean, you can't always compare scores to see how the game's going to be, but that's a pretty good indicator that this should be a very even game. They both played Corsica-Stickney very evenly, too, and they both got wins against Corsica-Stickney. So, Alcester Hudson moves into the rankings. We'll see if they belong, if they can beat a team like Avon.
So Gregory Parkston was throw out the records, but this one keep the records. Because of the 52-22.
That's why you watch
scores.
Football Insiders.
Exactly.
You have to know what to look for in the records and what not to.
And know when to throw them out and when to keep them close to the vest. It's going to be another great week of South Dakota high school football. You're going to be locking down with varsity. I will be in Fargo.
Up north.
Yeah, I'll be in Fargo. I'll be helping out up there. Jay Elson and I are up there for the South Dakota-North Dakota State football game on Saturday. But I will be helping out in the Fargo office with Mr. Jody Norstead. You'll be down here, I believe, with Darren Wallace.
D-Dub is going to do his some type of impression. I'm not sure what he's going to do, but
yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, he'll do his Deion Sanders impression because it's awesome.
We'll see. Ask for that on the internet.
Yes. At D Wallace Midco, ask for his Deion Sanders impression. We're going to throw him on blast right now and make him perform for you because that's what we do. But no, Darren's going to do a great job on Friday with Jandy and Jody. Thank you for watching. Well, thank you for joining Football Insiders because it's your idea. So I would hope you'd join us.
Yeah, I've been here every week. I plan to keep coming until they say no more Jandy.
Who will ever say no more Jandy?
Oh, you never know.
That's Jandy. I'm Brownie. We'll see you next week on Football Insiders.